Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are on page 607, Exclusive Concentration and the Ignorance, beginning with the sentence, there is a minor pragmatic use.
We are trying to find the cause and the origin of ignorance. And Sri Ranganath has told us that we are really not our body-mind life alone. We are the subconscient, the inconscient, the intraconscient, the supraconscient, and also the circumconscient. We are the whole universe. We are a microcosm of the whole universe, and the universe is the macrocosm. Man can become cosmic in his consciousness. So, now with this background, I'll start reading the para that we have to read today. So we are not only the body-mind life, but is it really a very, very shallow and useless thing? That's what he's going to answer. Okay? No, even the body-mind life has got some purpose and a use. Okay? There is a minor pragmatic use of exclusive concentration on the surface, which may also give us an indication in spite of its temporary character. The superficial man, living from moment to moment, plays, as it were, several parts in his present life, and while he is busy with each part, he is capable of an exclusive concentration and absorption in it, by which he forgets the rest of himself, puts it behind him for the moment, is to that extent self-oblivious. The man is for the moment the actor, the poet, the soldier, or whatever else he may have been constituted and formed into by some peculiar and characteristic action of his force of being, his tapas, his past conscious energy, and by the action which develops from it. Not only is he apt to deliver himself up to this exclusive concentration in a part of himself for the time being, but his success in the action very largely depends on the completeness with which he can thus put aside the rest of himself and live only in his immediate work. Yet, all the time, we can see that it is the whole man who is really doing the action and not merely this particular part of himself. What he does, the way he does it, the elements he brings into it, the stamp he gives to his work depends on his whole character, mind, information, genius, all that the past of him has made him, and not his past in this life only, but in other lives. And again, not only his past, but the past, the present, and the predestined future, both of himself and the world around him, are the determinants of his work. So you can see how vast the causes of your action is. Everything, there are so many forces. Your own past and the past of the world also, the environment, everything is contributing to your behavior. The present actor, poet or soldier in him is only a separative determination of his tapas. It is his force of being, organized for a particular kind of action of its energy, a separative movement of tapas which is able, and this ability is not a weakness, a deficiency, but a great power of the consciousness to absorb itself in any particular working to the temporary self-oblivion of the rest of himself, even though that rest is present all the time at the back of the consciousness and in the work itself, and is active or has its influence in the shaping of the work. This active self-oblivion of the man in his work and the part he plays differs from the other, the deeper self-oblivion, in that the wall of separation is less phenomenally and not at all enduringly complete. The mind can dissolve its concentration and go back from its work at any time to the consciousness of the larger self, of which this was a partial action. The superficial or apparent man cannot so go back at will or to the real man within him. He can only do it to some extent abnormally or supernormally, in exceptional conditions of his mentality, or more permanently and completely as the fruit of a long and arduous self-training, self-deepening, self-heightening, self-expansion. Still, he may go back. Therefore, the difference is phenomenal only, not essential. It is, in a sense, in both cases, the same movement of exclusive concentration, of absorption in a particular aspect of himself, action, movement of force, though with different circumstances and another manner of working. So, he is telling you that absorption in the physical, when you identify yourself as a mind, body and life, and you are doing a particular work, concentration is very necessary for success. You have to concentrate on what you are doing. If you are diffuse, your mind is going here and there, you will not be able to concentrate and do the work. So this is the minor. He started the paragraph with minor pragmatic use of exclusive concentration. Although it is creating ignorance, yet it is very useful for the physical world. So concentration is actually an exclusion of so many other things and narrowing down your mind action to one particular thing. So that is essential in the physical world. Though it is creating the ignorance. You are not aware of your intraconscious, you are not aware of your subconscious, but when you are sufficiently well developed, you can go there at your will. But when you are not sufficiently developed, it is very difficult to do that. That's what he has said. Okay? So
Okay.
I'll do one thing. I'll read the summary of what he has said. We'll get the gist of what he is saying. Okay? Now he has used the word here. He can get back to himself, he can do that, only to some extent. Abnormally and supernormally, do what? Go into the intraconscious or the supraconscious. In exceptional conditions of his mentality, and more permanently and completely, as the fruit of a long and arduous self-training, self-deepening, self-heightening, self-expansion. One word for that, yoga. If you do yoga very, very sincerely, this capacity to go into your intraconscious and superconscious becomes possible. But that is long and arduous self-training. Yoga is not easy. Okay? So, now I read the summary of what he has said here. The exclusive concentration of the surface has its function and its usefulness, but it's a pragmatic and minor capability. In each life, the soul takes on a different role in the superficial part of the whole person. It is the personality of the body, life and mind. In each life, that is different and temporal. Man can be a soldier, a poet or an artist. He forgets the whole and limits himself to the particular role on the surface in that particular life on earth. This life he may be a poet, next life he may be a soldier, next life he may be an artist. Okay? So, he forgets the whole and limits himself to the particular role on the surface in that particular life on earth. Actually, all the past stored in the intraconscious contributes to what he is at present on the surface of body-mind life. Soldier, poet, artist. But he has forgotten the whole. He doesn't remember what he was in his past life. He may forget, but the past is influencing him in his present action. Let us note that success in the world action depends on how completely he can limit himself to the task at hand. But this exclusive surface consciousness is not obligatory, not mandatory. Man can always go back to the whole being by development of consciousness, which is yoga. Okay? There are two concentrations: a shallow self-oblivion, exclusive concentration on the surface. A shallow self-oblivion, you have forgotten what you are on the whole. A deeper self-oblivion in which the wall of separation is dissolved and he can identify himself with all other souls. By yogic development, the deeper self-oblivion can be obtained. This is not ignorance. The man who is limited to the shallow self-oblivion of the surface cannot go back at will to the deeper self-oblivion. He is in ignorance. The spiritual man is not so hampered. He can switch easily from the shallower to the deeper at will. He is not in ignorance when he is in yoga. This is what Chandra said in the para. We go to the next para?
Yes.
This power of exclusive concentration is not confined to absorption in a particular character or type of working of one's larger self, but extends to a complete self-forgetfulness in the particular action in which we happen at the moment to be engaged. The actor, in moments of great intensity, forgets that he is an actor and becomes the part that he is playing on the stage. Not that he really thinks himself Rama or Ravana, but that he identifies himself for the time being with the form of character and action which the name represents, and so completely as to forget the real man who is playing it. So the poet forgets himself, the man, the worker in his work, and he is for the moment only the inspired impersonal energy which works itself out in formation of word and rhythm. He is using the word word and rhythm because he is talking as a poet. Of all else, he is oblivious. The soldier forgets himself in the act and becomes the charge and the fury and the slaying. In the same way, the man who is overcome by intense anger forgets himself, as it is commonly said, or as it has been still more aptly and forcibly put, becomes anger. And these terms express a real truth, which is not the whole truth of the man's being at the time, but a practical, but a practical fact of his consciousness, of his conscious energy in action. He does forget himself, forgets all the rest of himself with its other impulses and powers of self-restraint and self-direction, so that he acts simply as the energy of the passion which preoccupies him. He has spoken about anger, that's why he is saying this. He becomes that energy for the time being. This is as far as self-forgetfulness can go in the normal active human psychology. For it must return soon to the wider self-aware consciousness, of which this self-forgetfulness is only a temporary movement. Temporary it can be, but temporary in lives. Maybe this life, next life, but ultimately he has to go to the larger being that he really is. The intraconscient, the superconscient and the circumconscient. Okay? So, he is continuing with the same theory. He is giving the example of anger. So, when you are doing a particular work, you are concentrated on that work. And the success of the work will depend upon how concentrated you are. Secondly, Even when you are not doing anything but you get angry, you are becoming anger. The force that is coming, you are identifying yourself with the force that is coming in, the passion. You have forgotten that you are what you are. You are identified with the passion. Okay. So this is as far as self-forgetfulness can go in the normal active human psychology. So, I'll read the summary of what he has said. This exclusive concentration can occur in any field of human activity, and it is not confined to some particular types of activity. Anything you may do, okay? You may be an engineer, you may be an artist, you may be a football player, you may be anything, but you are fully concentrated in that. It could occur in the actor, the poet, or the soldier. In moments of great intensity, the actor identifies himself with the character he is playing, Rama or Ravana. But this is only for the time being, not forever. So too with the poet and or the soldier. The soldier becomes the charge, the fury, the slaying. The angry man becomes anger. The truth of momentary identification is not the whole truth, which and when he recovers and becomes his normal self. This is as far as self-forgetfulness can go in the shallow self-oblivion, which is a temporary lapse of memory, or rather a shift of memory. So this is what Sandra is saying, that
Go to the next.
yeah, we go to the next para? Yeah. But in the larger universal consciousness, not the shallow body-mind life, but the larger universal consciousness, there must be a power of carrying this movement to its absolute point, to the greatest extreme possible for any relative movement to reach. And this point is reached not in human unconsciousness, which is not abiding and always refers back to the awakened conscious being that man normally and characteristically is, but in the inconscience of material nature. This inconscience is no more real than the ignorance of exclusive concentration in our temporary being, which limits the waking consciousness of man. For as in us, so in the atom, the metal, the plant, in every form of material nature, in every energy of material nature, there is, we know, a secret soul, a secret will, a secret intelligence at work, other than the mute, self-oblivious form, the conscient. Conscient even in unconscient things of the Upanishad, without whose presence and informing conscious force or tapas, no work of nature could be done. What is inconscient there is the Prakriti, the formal, the emotional action of the energy, absorbed in the working, identified with it to such an extent as to be bound in a sort of trance or swoon of concentration, unable to go back, while imprisoned in that form, to its to its real self, to the integral conscious being and integral force of conscious being which it has put behind it, of which in its ecstatic trance of mere working and energy, it has become oblivious. Prakriti, the executive force, becomes unaware of Purusha, the conscious being, holds him hidden within herself, and becomes again slowly aware not only with the emergence of consciousness from the swoon of the inconscience. Purusha indeed consents to assume the apparent form of itself, which Prakriti constructs for him. It seems to become the inconscient, the physical being, the vital being, the mental being. But in all these, it remains still in reality itself. The light of the secret conscious being supports and informs the action of the inconscient or emergingly conscious energy of nature. Okay? So, these are simple statements, that's why I am reading the summary. Here also, the third para, we'll read the summary. This power of exclusive concentration, self-diminution, self-limitation should be capable of taking itself into the extreme point of self-annihilation as is in the inconscience. So he is talking of the universal, he is not talking of the individual now, he is talking of the universal. The power of the consciousness can completely forget itself and become the inconscient. Okay? So he is not talking of the individual, but he is talking of the universal. This absolute inconscience in the atom, the metal, the plant, is not real ignorance, but a willed, voluntary condition, just as is the shallow self-oblivion of the superficial being of the body, life, mind. So it is not something, your soul has not plunged into ignorance, attacked by some other force. It has itself willed itself into this condition. Why? Because it's an adventure. It is putting itself into the most difficult circumstances and it is taking it as a challenge to come out and become itself again. Leela, there is a play of the divine. Okay? So, ignorance is not something imposed on one. It is self-imposed on one. Why? Because it's a game. Okay, so that's the thing. As we know, there is a secret soul lurking in every animate and inanimate form. The conscient in the inconscient. Chetana Achetananam in the Katha Upanishad. Shem does not mention the Upanishad, it's in the Katha Upanishad. Chetana, the conscious, in the unconscious, is there in the Katha Upanishad. Without the presence of the secret soul, there could be no work in the universe. Prakriti seems to be doing the work, but it's a Purusha which is supporting the Prakriti. Doing, I will sanction your whatever you are doing.
I read once in maybe Upanishad, if I did not work, these worlds would perish.
Yeah, that's in the Gita.
In the Gita.
The Bhagavad Gita.
Ah.
Because what is actually meant by that?
Yes.
The work is the action that you are doing in the physical
Yes.
world. If action ceases for you, you are in the self and the world disappears. So that is what is meant by the Gita's self. That if I did not work, if I did not support the action here, everything would collapse. So this is the consciousness behind, hiding behind the unconscious, that is allowing the movement to take place. Okay? So, what is inconscient in the Prakriti, the outermost form in which the energy in motion is absorbed and plunged into its own working. This is a swoon, an exclusive concentration gone so far as to be unable to get back to its own true infinite being. Rama, the character, is unable to get back to his real character, the actor playing the part. When the play ends, then he can get back to what he is. The actor has become Rama almost permanently on the stage. Okay? This Prakriti, the stage is your present life. So you have forgotten what you are. You are the soul, you are the divine soul. You have forgotten that. This Prakriti becomes unaware, oblivious of the Purusha, which she recognizes again in the slow evolution upwards. Through yoga, you can again slowly get back to your own identity of divine nature. And to this oblivion of Prakriti, the body, mind, life, the Purusha consents. He willingly forgets himself in the external form of body, life and mind, which Prakriti has constructed for him. Yet all the while, the Purusha remains himself fully. The Purusha supports with his true light the apparent reality of body, life and mind. This was Chandra said. So unconsciousness is only a superficial appearance. Behind it is a consciousness supporting it. It's a totally different way of seeing things. Okay, so.
We go to the next paragraph.
Yes. The inconscience. He is now discussing the inconscience. The inconscience is superficial, like the ignorance of the waking human mind, or the inconscience or subconscious of a sleeping mind, and within it is the all conscient. It is entirely phenomenal, but it is a complete phenomenon. So complete is it that it is only by an impulsion of evolutionary consciousness emerging into other forms less imprisoned by this inconscient method of working that it can come back to itself, recover in the animal a partial awareness, then in man at his highest some possibility of approach to a first more complete though still superficial initiation of a truly conscious working. But still, as in the case of a superficial and a real man, where there is also a similar though lesser inability, the difference is phenomenal only. Essentially, in the universal order of things, the inconscience of the material nature is the same exclusive concentration, the same absorption in the work and the energy as in the self-limitation of the waking human mind, or the concentration of the self-forgetting mind in its working. It is only that self-limitation. I may have to read that sentence again. It is only that self-limitation carried to farthest point of self-forgetfulness which becomes not a temporary action but the law of its action. I think you have to read it in this way. It is only that self-limitation carried to a farthest point of self-forgetfulness which becomes not a temporary action but the law of its action. Nescience in nature is a complete self-ignorance. The partial knowledge and general ignorance of man is a partial self-ignorance, marking in her evolutionary order a return towards self-knowledge. But both are, and all ignorance is, when examined, a superficially exclusive self-forgetful concentration of tapas, of the conscious energy of being in a particular line or section of its movement, of which alone it is aware, or which alone it seems to be on the surface. The ignorance is effective within the bounds of that movement and valid for its purposes, but phenomenal, partial, superficial, not essentially real, not integral. We have to use the word real necessarily in a quite limited and not in its absolute sense. For the ignorance is real enough, but it is not the whole truth of our being, and by regarding it by itself, even its truth is misrepresented to our outer awareness. In that true truth of itself, it is an involved consciousness and knowledge evolving back to itself, but it is dynamically effective as an inconscience and an ignorance. So, what he is saying is, he is repeating in several words, the ignorance is real in a sense, because here you are really ignorant and you are incapable of doing. But in the spiritual sense, it is not real, it is only an appearance. So you have to go from here to there and then you realize that it is not real. But while you are here, your ignorance is real. Okay, that's what he is saying. So, again I read the summary in simpler words. Okay. There is the inconscience of the individual in the normal man. This has two states: shallow self-oblivion, deep self-oblivion. Even when you are in the spiritual field, that also is a deep oblivion, because the world becomes unreal to you. So when you go to the third level, then you are really, there is no oblivion at all. You know the whole thing. But in the physical world, we are oblivious of the soul. When you realize your soul, you are oblivious of the world, unless you are in the cosmic consciousness. If you have the cosmic consciousness, everything is real. But still it's semi-knowledge. You go to the third level, there is no ignorance there at all. So in this sense, even a yogi, as a Isha Upanishad says very clearly, even when you are in knowledge, that is a self sort of ignorance, if you deny the reality of the world. But if you don't deny the reality of the world, then you are nearer to knowledge. So even the spiritual yogi, even he is ignorant in a sense, unless he goes to the third level. Okay? So that too, he says, shallow self-oblivion here and deep self-oblivion, level 2, in which he forgets the shallow oblivion, in which he forgets father, house, car, to concentrate on the task at hand. He can recover easily the forgotten things. There is a shallow self-oblivion. As we gave the example, he is a mechanic, he is looking at things, he has forgotten who his wife is, he has forgotten who is, he has forgotten, he has put it to the background of his. The second one, in which he sees the one and seems to forget the many. This too is not ignorance. Okay? There is an inconscience of universal nature in which recovery of forgotten things is not easy. Okay? It has to recover them by slow, long effort of evolutionary development through stages of plant, insect, animal, ordinary man, spiritual man. So you recover your true self only in this by evolution. And that's not easy, that's difficult. But in the physical world, when I forget where my address is because I am working here, I can recover it easily. But in the spiritual field, self-oblivion is very difficult to handle. That's what he said. Then, this disability in universal nature is complete. The disability in the individual is temporary and recovery is easy. It's a minor disability. In all cases, ignorance is a self-willed and self-executed forgetfulness. This is not a real permanent ignorance, because in all things, animate or inanimate, there is a secret consciousness inherent. This is the Katha Upanishad's Chetana Achetananam. It is that which is there all the time hiding, but you have forgotten about it. Okay? So that's the para that we read just now. This being the root nature of the ignorance, the word being is not a noun here, it's a verb.
This being the, yes.
Okay, so this being the root nature of the ignorance, a practical truth of a phenomenally, but not really dividing, of a limiting and separative conscious energy absorbed in its works to the apparent forgetfulness of its integral and real self, we may answer the questions that arise of the why, the where, and the how of this movement. Why should it be like that at all? The reason for the ignorance, its necessity, becomes clear enough once we have seen that without it, the object of manifestation in the world would be impossible, could not be done at all, or not completely, or not in the way in which it should be and is done. Each side of the manifold ignorance has its justification, which is only a part of the one general necessity. Man, living in his timeless being, could not have thrown himself into the stream of time with that movement of subjugation to its flux from moment to moment, which is the nature of his present living. Living in his superconscient or subliminal self, he could not have worked out from the knot of his individual mentality the relations which he has to ravel and unravel with the world about him, or would have to do it in a radically different fashion. Living in the universal self and not in the egoistic separative consciousness, he could not evolve that separate action. So, living in the universal self and not in the egoistic separative consciousness, he could not evolve that separate action. Okay? Personality, outlook for himself as a soul or the initial center and point of reference, which is the contribution of the ego sense to the world workings. He has to put on the temporal, the psychological, the egoistic ignorance in order to protect himself against the light of the infinite and the largeness of the universal, so as to develop behind this defense his temporal individuality in the cosmos. He has to live as if in this one life and put on the ignorance of his infinite past and his future. For otherwise, if the past were present in him, he could not work out his present selected relations with his environment in the way intended. His knowledge would be too great for him. It would necessarily alter the whole spirit and balance and form of his action. He has to live in the mind, absorbed by his bodily life and not in the supermind. For otherwise, all these protecting walls of ignorance created by the limiting, dividing, differentiating power of mind would not be built or would become too thin and transparent for his purpose. We'll read this para next time again in detail, because it's quite what he says. He's explaining why it is necessary to become ignorant. Okay, so we'll do this next time.
We did a lot today.
Pardon?
We did a lot today.
Yeah, because I didn't go sentence by sentence. I read the summary.
Yeah.
It's very simple what you're saying. That's
very good.